Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Dean Meadows for another episode of Dean's Dialogue in association with the Daily Apologist. I am so excited for today's show. I am here with Dr. Ralph Gilmore from Freed-Hardeman University as we're starting our series Reasoning with Ralph. Ralph Gilmore, it is great to have you on the show. How you been, man?
I have been fine. How are you?
I'm doing great. So as we go ahead and kick off the show, there's so many people that have been blessed by your work at Freed, your work in philosophy. Obviously, you've had some very significant debates, throughout your career. I mean, you've spoken, I think, maybe just about everywhere. But for those of you who don't know you, why don't you go ahead and give us your background? Go ahead and tell us, where you were born, raised, how you came to Christ, and how you got to Freed-Hardeman.
Oh, wow. I was born and raised near Mount Pleasant, Tennessee, in a place called Sandy Hook. Glad to be from there. When I was 17 years old, I went off for what I thought was going to be a one-year stint at Freed-Hardeman College at that time because it was an agreement with my parents. So that would go 1 year, and then I wanted to go to the Air Force. I stayed here I was going to be a navigator at first because my eyes are not perfect. So I was going to be a math major. All right, then I was a math major here. And then after hearing Thomas B. Warren in a couple of classes, I decided to become a Bible major. And I graduated here. Then I went to, there's a third-year program for Bible majors only here. It was just a 2-year school. And then I finished up at Lipscomb in Nashville, and then went to Harding Graduate School in Memphis. Took a year at SIU and Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, and then about 3.5 more years at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, and I got the PhD.
Oh, awesome.
Okay, so that's the academic background. My wife and I had determined that we were going to teach at a Christian university somewhere, and Freed-Hardeman is where we came in 1981. I was baptized when I was 9, and I was leading singing, but I hated to speak. I was not a speaker, so I hated to take the speech class at Freed-Hardeman. Well, the teacher of the speech class, I guess, recognized some things that I didn't recognize myself, and I did intercollegiate debate at Freed-Hardeman for the last year that I was here, and learned that I love debate. So over the years, I've had a few.
Awesome. So tell me about your time at Freed-Hardeman. How many years have you been there?
Came here in 1981.
1981?
Can't get another job.
I can't get another job.
I've loved it here for 37. This is my 38th year.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
1 or 2 more will be it for me this year, and maybe 1 more, or maybe just this year. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But I still love being with college students. They, keep me going. My wife is retired. The only thing hard about doing this is that I get up in the morning now and she doesn't. And she used to get up before me. But anyway, that's what else?
What do you specifically teach at Freed-Hardeman?
Oh dear. I teach courses. I teach some text courses. As far as the text courses are concerned, I teach 1st and 2nd Corinthians, and I teach Romans, and I teach Hebrews.
Okay.
With regard to the philosophy stuff, I have taught philosophy, intro to philosophy and history of philosophy, and I've taught Christian evidences at the undergraduate level, critical thinking at the undergraduate level and the graduate level, values and ethics at the undergraduate level and the graduate level, and advanced apologetics at the graduate level, and stuff like that.
So you teach everything at Freed-Hardeman pretty much.
I have my share.
There you go. So, kind of transitioning over, thank you for giving us, your background so that the viewers who may not be familiar with you kind of have a gist of who you are. Maybe one of the most significant people, in the churches of Christ in the last 30, 40, 50 years as far as kind of bringing the church along in the area of apologetics is Thomas B. Warren, who you've mentioned has had an influence on you at a very young age. So why do you think in this day and age, apologetics is needed in the church as maybe a foundational thing for people growing up in the church?
Well, that's a broad question. Thank you for that softball. What I'm thinking is, what I'm thinking is, Dean, is that the concepts in the Bible about apologetics and the way that people approached the scriptures was apologetically. Jesus himself was in a mode where he gave answers for people that ask him questions. So the Greek word apologia, that's the noun form, means it means a defense. The verb form, apologeomai, means to be involved in the process of giving a defense. Some of the famous places where it would be used would, like Paul saying, I am set for the defense of the gospel in Philippians 1:17. Or in 1 Peter 3, verse 15, Peter says to the people that were undergoing fiery trials of various circumstances, we don't know the full context there, I guess, but to them he said, you need to be ready to give an answer. No, first of all, he said in 1 Peter 3:15, make sure that Christ is set apart in your heart, because this is a difficult thing to do, to answer people's questions. You have to have the right heart about it. And if Jesus is not set apart in your heart, then maybe you're not ready to listen to the rest of the passage. People hear the part about being ready to give an answer, but they don't hear the part about consecrate Jesus as Lord in your heart, which means it's a sobering thing. It's also fun to read and research the various things that come out, but it is a sober and serious thing. So sanctify Jesus Lord in your hearts and be ready to give an answer, which is a lifelong process. If you think that you're up on this, then check the browser today. And you will find out that you're not up on this, because somebody has come up with something else that you need to be studying if you're going to be ready to give an answer. And then he notices, I teach my students that you should treat it like steak and sizzle. Like the steak and sizzle at a Mexican restaurant, the fajitas are coming out and they're already sizzling, right? So you're already getting hungry. Okay, hopefully that sets up a good meal for the steak if you ordered steak fajitas. So here's the steak. The steak is study to give an answer. The sizzle is make sure you sanctify Jesus in your hearts first. And then the latter part of the verse, you do this with meekness and fear. The meekness idea is the idea of you make sure that your heart is right. Meek in spirit does not mean that you are weak. It does not mean that you can't, lift 500 pounds. It does mean, however, that you are meek about it and ready to be taught yourself. And you do this with phobia, which is a strange word that Peter uses, I think. I do it with meekness and fear. Well, whom do we fear? Well, first of all, we fear God because we're trying to speak on behalf of him. Okay, a little further in Acts 17, verses 1, 2, and 3. I don't have my notes in front of me. We're just doing this, kind of extemporaneous here. But in Acts 17, 1, 2, and 3, we find that Paul was passing through Amphipolis and Apollonia, and he came to Thessalonica, where the synagogue of the Jews. And then notice all of the apologetics words that follow. He openly alleges and he claims and he proves, and he dialegomai, which is a word for has a deep discussion with the people who are there for the Sabbath. And he's recognized as a rabbi, so he teaches them about Jesus. The brethren in Berea were more noble than those in Thessalonica, in verses 10 and 11 of the same chapter, because they searched the scriptures to see if they were true. So the first thing is, if the Bible commands it, it's not going to be outdated. But the second part of your question is, what does that look like in a new generation? Now that is maybe a little harder to answer.
Okay.
Look and see what the Bible says is one thing, but to see how it looks in another. Give me one more minute. I just noticed something from the Barna Group, research group, that says that beginning in 2019, the largest group among us is no longer going to be the millennials. I mean, in the world, not just the United States. They're at about 32% now, but the next generation are called the Gen Z, Generation Z. And they're going to be a little bigger than the millennials starting next year sometime. and they're going to be at about 32%. The millennials are going to be at 31.5%. So what that means is, Dean, is that the culture is constantly changing, even as we sit. Now, you lead me to where you want us to go next.
Well, I guess the question that I have, you've definitely noted that this is important, just as a person that's involved in the Christian faith. I guess my question is, if it's that important and it's something that's to be commanded and it's not going to be outdated, what are some things that you've seen over your experience, whether it's at Freed, whether it's just observing in general the direction of the church? What are some of the things that you've seen that people kind of tend to shy away from, apologetics, whether it's the study of it or whether it's the engaging the
Sure.
culture and people around them?
Well, the new generation, Dean, is very smart. It's not a question of intelligence, but it's a question of exposure and conditioning. For instance, according to the Gen Z research, the average person in Generation Z is going to pass his or her thinking over 4 or 5 screens a day. So one thing that makes it challenging is that you have to give it to them in small doses, because they are so fragmented. Even right now, in chapel at Freed Hardeman, we can't keep everybody off of their smartphones during chapel because they're addicted. That's a technological reason. Here is a philosophical reason. Philosophically, they're still living in the generation of those who deny the existence of absolute truth. Now, if that has only happened since about 1970 or 72 or so, that the coin is almost exactly flipped of those in 1970 who are trying to find truth, as opposed to those in 2018 who come to school and they're trying to find truth. So one of the things that we see that would be causing a decrease in the interest in apologetics is because there's a decrease in the belief that actually anybody can know truth. And if you can't know truth, well, what good is the study of apologetics?
Yeah, good point.
So I don't want to talk too much in a row without hearing from you.
No, I think that's definitely something that I think has impacted at least my generation, millennials, and I think you see that in Gen Y, Gen Z, as you've mentioned. One of the things that I come across just in talking to people in the church is, and maybe it's a right assumption, wrong assumption, I want your view on that, but they feel like in order to be an effective, quote, apologist, right, that they somehow have to have a PhD. And since they don't have PhD or they don't have the resources to get a PhD, well, they'll leave that to somebody else who's off in grad school. Do you think that that's, one, do you think that has a tendency to be an accurate assessment? And two, is that assessment that is made correct?
Okay, let's look at some parallel areas first.
Okay.
All right. The youth, is there a belief out there that people who do mission work must have a PhD in missiology? And yet there's a lot of people that go on mission trips and, to Haiti and Guatemala and many other places in the world. And they know that they don't have a PhD in the area, but it's a quantitative thing. It's not a qualitative thing. Qualitatively, you're still doing mission work. And in the same way, do you ever ask anybody if they could help you with your health? Well, yeah, you can ask people, and sometimes they may even have great ideas of how to help you of what might be wrong with you. You see, 1 Peter 3 is not written to preachers. 1 Peter 3 is written to Christians. Now, if 1 Peter 3 was in 1st or 2nd Timothy or Titus, you might could argue, oh, that's something that only trained preachers can do.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's written to every Christian. Therefore, I try to teach it's the job of every Christian to be ready to give an answer. And you will do it whether or not you're trained.
That's a good point.
There's people who are out there who are going to be asking you questions about your faith. If you are at all a person who believes that Jesus should shine through you, So if Jesus is shining through you, they're going to ask questions about your faith. Do you think that you have to have a PhD to answer? Well, no.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, if I didn't think that it was important to the ministry of trying to train other people to do apologetics, then I would never have done it. It's too much of a strain on your pocketbook. It's too much of a strain on your marriage and your family and all that other kind of stuff if you didn't really think that it was worth it.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, you can do it at the local level. You can do it at the koinonia level, that which is common to all people. You can do it on that level and be perfectly pleasing to God.
No, I think that's a great answer to that question. Just because, and this is just kind of my personal assessment is oftentimes, growing up before I was the old man that I am now at 31.
Oh, you're so old. Socks that are older than
you. Nice. Is that I always thought that growing up, apologetics was an event on the calendar, right? Well, hey, 2 years down the line, we're going to have this person, come in and they're going to teach us Christian evidences and you'll be trained and you'll be good to go. And that happened. And then as soon as the apologist left and it was 6 months down the line, whether I didn't just, get it through listening or take, adequate notes, it was gone, right? It was gone. And one of the things that I see is that apologetics can't just be an event on a calendar. Those things are right and good and okay, but it can't just be that. I think
it's a way of life. It's a journey.
Yeah.
I am not fully trained in apologetics. I have a PhD. I have a master's degree, from Harding Graduate School, where I took a lot of courses with Thomas B. Warren, as well as other teachers, and I have a PhD. But to tell you the truth, I'm not an expert in apologetics. Why? Well, apologetics hits basically three big areas: science, religion, and philosophy. And let's say that you decided that you wanted to be an expert in philosophy. Well, the truth is, you have to pass comps to indicate that you have a general knowledge in philosophy. But then by the time you write your dissertation, it is in such a small, defined area that it'll be difficult for you to say that you are an expert in philosophy. Okay, and by the time you got to be an expert in philosophy, you're an old man on Medicare, and then what are you going to do to become an expert in science? And then what are you going to do to become an expert in religion? That's why in my last debate with Dr. Alex Rosenberg at Ohio State University, he's a major atheist, well-trained, former head of the philosophy department at Duke University. He's a friend, but nonetheless, he is an atheist. And so I knew that he had a PhD from Johns Hopkins University, which means he's going to have an advantage over me on the science side. Well, I have some advantages over him on the religion side. But guess what I had when I was debating? On my right-hand side, I had a guy with a PhD in biochemistry from Vanderbilt University, Dr. Joe DeWeese. And on my left-hand side, I had a guy with a PhD in textual criticism from New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, Dr. Doug Burleson. So none of us is able to be an expert in the entire realm. So we try to be functionally good at what we are able to do.
So that leads me into my next question for you. So let's say there's someone listening to the program now, they're in high school, they're in college, or maybe they're just a young parent that wants to start doing this at the local level. Where would you suggest that they start? What books would you say that they should start? Where do they begin on this journey?
Well, if you want to stay in the churches of Christ, then Apologetics Press is an option. Also, WarrenApologetics.org. I'm most associated with them, and I feel closer to them. As in Thomas B. Warren, there's a university in Vienna, it's a school in Vienna, West Virginia, which is named after Thomas B. Warren and therefore called warrenapologetics.org. Charles Pugh is the excellent director of that group, and he has a scad of materials that are available for you to do research on, as well as the last two debates that I've done and the last book that I did, and many other books. Also, I like what you are doing quite well. The blog sites are excellent for you to listen to. If you want to go outside the churches of Christ, I like to use Norman Geisler's book. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. And there are more and more of them, Dean.
Yeah.
You know, so like when guys like you get connected to apologetics, it's a great thing.
Yeah, no doubt. So we've got seven minutes left, and so you've mentioned Apologetics Press, you've mentioned Warren Apologetics Center, you've mentioned the Daily Apologist, you've mentioned Frank Turek and Norman Geisler.
Yes.
So the last thing that I want to ask as we kind of introduce people into apologetics, what do you think are some of the dangers of apologetics? Is there anything about apologetics that can negatively influence your relationship with God? Is there anything negative?
It's possible. It is possible. That's why the meekness and fear, I think, the Holy Spirit included in 1 Peter 3:15. But Dean, here's the problem with apologetics is that it needs an adjective, because everybody has their own separate apologists. Today, as we speak, there's a Supreme Court nominee, who's defending the fact that he's innocent of something that he's been charged. And then there are others who are bringing up the idea, I'm not big into politics now, and then there are others who are going to be saying just the opposite. Oh no, he should not be Supreme Court Justice. Both sides have their apologists. Therefore, when we talk about apologetics, it's really Christian apologetics.
Okay.
And we just abbreviate it because there are Muslim apologetics and there's Hindu apologetics and Buddhist apologetics, etc. So first of all, you got to make sure that what it is that you're defending is what it is that you need to be defending. It could very well be that we have had our eyes closed to something. Another thing is apologetics is a mindset, and you can impress people if you're able to answer a lot of questions. Paul talks about this in Philippians chapter 1. He said that some are preaching out of jealousy, the Greek word aselgeia, or selfishness. Some are doing it for their own gain. Paul goes ahead to say, hey, one way or the other, the truth is being preached. But what is not good is that you could be involved in apologetics, and if you're doing it for the wrong reason, then there could be possible implications for your own soul. Another thing is it can make you stinking arrogant. And I hate that. I hate guys who come to my class who think that they already know it all, because I don't know it all and they don't know it all. So I'm not going to put up with that attitude for very long in my class.
Yeah, I think those are definitely some pitfalls of apologetics, is that it can increase the sense of self pride, self reflection, things like that, and it can definitely, like you said, it has implications for the soul as well. As we begin to wrap up here, I just want to say thank you so much for your time, Dr. Gilmore. It has definitely been a blessing for the half an hour that we've been able to spend together, and I'll definitely look forward to doing more episodes in the future. And if there's anything that you want to say, I'll give you the last word before we wrap up the show.
Well, Dean, I am impressed with you, and I would like to do this once a month. We will try to have the glitches worked out so that we can have video streaming, which I feel personally is better, so that you can actually see us. I do apologize for the interruption a while ago, but I can't I don't know how to account for some brain damage. I mean,
No, that's okay.
I'm
That's
just
that's all
kidding.
right. No, it's
What I want
okay.
to say about apologetics is you're going to do apologetics whether or not you are trained. Somebody's going to ask you the why questions. It was one of the first words that you learned to say. You learn to say why, why. When many younger people and older people start applying that to their Christian faith, it's a little embarrassing because they haven't been put in a situation where they have been asked to do that. And sometimes we have dumbed down our teaching to our young people,
Amen.
assuming that they don't have the ability or the interest to know. Do you know, 2 years ago with the war and flu debate, I thought students at Freed Hardeman were really not going to be interested in, I'm sorry, the Gilmore Rosenberg debate. I thought that students would not be interested in coming, but we filled up two 56 passenger buses, and many others went in their cars.
Hmm.
I was very wrong about this generation.
I appreciate those closing words, Dr. Gilmore. And thank you guys for all of you who are tuning in to Dean's Dialogue in association with the Daily Apologist. This is Dean Meadows on behalf of Dr. Gilmore and the rest of the team. Thank you for listening, and remember, equip yourself to engage culture.